It's funny how life has a way of turning the tables when you least expect it. One day, someone can be looking down on you from their imagined pedestal, convinced they hold power over your life, and the next, fate humbles them so hard it's almost poetic to witness. I used to own and operate a small but popular food truck in our suburban neighborhood, specializing in homemade tacos, quesadillas, and burritos. After years of saving, I finally bought a used truck, customized it, and poured my heart into the menu. I wasn't getting rich, but I was making enough to support my family and build a loyal customer base. The truck became a local favorite, especially on weekends when people didn't feel like cooking and wanted quick, tasty, affordable meals. Everything was going great until Karen moved into the neighborhood. You know the type. Always watching, always complaining, always finding something to criticize. She was the self-appointed queen of our HOA, even though the position wasn't official, and she seemed to take it upon herself to enforce every rule she could find, and sometimes ones she just made up. At first, I tried to be cordial. She'd walk by the truck, eyeing it suspiciously, and make little comments like, "I hope you have the proper licenses for this, or I'll be checking to make sure you're not attracting the wrong crowd." I brushed it off. There's always someone like that, right? But one Saturday afternoon, she crossed a line. My truck was parked in the cul-de-sac near the park, where I'd been serving for months without a single complaint. Families were lined up, kids were playing, and the smell of sizzling carne asada filled the air. Karen marched right up to me wearing oversized sunglasses and holding her phone like a weapon. Without so much as a hello, she told me I was violating HOA rules by operating a business in a residential area. I politely explained I had a permit from the city and had cleared it with the actual HOA board months ago, but she wasn't having it. She demanded I shut down immediately. When I didn't, she stepped aside and called the police. I'm not easily rattled, but when you see someone calling the cops on you, it's hard not to get nervous. The officers arrived about 15 minutes later. By then, Karen was acting like she'd caught a criminal, telling them I was operating illegally, disturbing the peace and blocking traffic. The cops, to their credit, were professional. They asked for my permit, inspected the truck, and confirmed everything was perfectly legal. One of them even bought a taco before leaving. Karen's face was priceless, tight-lipped, flushed red, and visibly seething. She stormed off, muttering something about making a formal complaint. I thought that would be the end of it, but Karen wasn't done. Over the next few weeks, she started a petty little crusade against me. She emailed the HOA board constantly, claiming my truck was noisy, unsanitary, and attracting undesirable people. She took photos of my customers and sent them around as evidence. At one point, she even tried to get the city to revoke my permit by fabricating complaints about food safety. Luckily, every inspection I'd ever had came back clean, and the officials quickly realized she was just a nuisance. Still, the stress was wearing on me. One day, the HOA board finally called a meeting to discuss community concerns, and Karen showed up with a binder full of nonsense. She presented it like she was prosecuting a criminal case, flipping through photos of my truck, printouts of Yelp reviews, and random screenshots from my Instagram. When it was my turn to speak, I calmly presented my permits, inspection records, and letters from happy customers. The board sided with me, telling Karen there was no violation. That was the first real crack I saw in her smug attitude. She left the meeting without making eye contact, and for the first time, I felt like maybe she'd finally back off. Turns out she didn't have much of a choice. A few months later, I noticed Karen's fancy SUV was gone, replaced by an older, beat-up sedan. She stopped walking her little designer dog, and the once perfectly manicured lawn in front of her house started to look neglected. Word got around that her husband had left her and she'd lost her job at some corporate office downtown. I wasn't the type to celebrate someone's misfortune, but I won't lie. I was curious. Then, one evening, while I was fueling up my truck at the Shell station, I saw her. Karen, wearing a bright yellow polo with the Shell logo, was behind the counter, flipping burgers for the attached convenience store's tiny food stand. She froze when she saw me, spatula in hand, clearly hoping I wouldn't recognize her. But of course I did. Our eyes met, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, in the most polite tone I could muster, I said, "Hope you have the proper licenses for that." She blinked, her face turning red again, and mumbled something under her breath. I paid for my gas, gave her a little nod, and walked out with my head high. It wasn't revenge. I hadn't lifted a finger to make this happen. But life has a way of balancing the scales without our help. The woman who once tried to shut down my dream was now working a job she'd have probably looked down on months before. I drove away that night feeling lighter than I had in a long time, not because she'd fallen, but because I'd survived her attempts to ruin me without stooping to her level. The best revenge, I realized, wasn't getting even. It was living well despite the people who want to see you fail. And as my food truck rolled toward the next neighborhood, music playing and the smell of fresh tortillas wafting through the air, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. So if you ever find yourself dealing with a self-appointed enforcer who thrives on drama and control, remember this: you don't always have to fight fire with fire. Sometimes, all you have to do is stand your ground, keep doing your thing, and wait. Sooner or later, life will serve up the perfect dish of poetic justice. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more true tales of drama, karma, and unexpected twists, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to KH Stories for your next dose of real-life entertainment. Your support keeps these stories coming, and I can't wait to share the next one with you.